Your screen is dead. The digital voice is silent. You are disconnected, and you are lost. But for the original inhabitants of this land, lost was not a concept. It was a relationship. The world was not a blank space to be mapped. It was a living book filled with language. This is the forgotten knowledge of how to read the world. We have become a species reliant on satellites, on a voice from a box telling us to turn left in 300 feet. This convenience has come at a profound cost, a severing of our connection to the most basic systems of the earth. We have forgotten the language of the sky, the wind, the water, and the trees. But this knowledge, this deep literacy of the natural world, was perfected by the indigenous peoples of the Americas over tens of thousands of years. It was not just a set of survival hacks. It was a holistic science, a spiritual practice, and a daily reality woven into language, story, and ceremony. This is not a single tool like a compass which can be broken. This is a web of knowledge where each thread supports the others. When one clue is hidden, when the sun is blocked by clouds or the stars are veiled by fog, a dozen others present themselves. Today, we journey into that web. We are seeking 10 of the forgotten ways to find direction, place, and purpose using the greatest map ever created, the world itself. Method 1. The sun's daily journey, the shadow clock. The most dominant force in our sky is and always has been the sun. We know instinctively that it rises in the east and sets in the west, but this is a general and often imprecise guide. For true accuracy, the ancestors of this land used the sun's shadow. This is the shadow stick method, a clock and compass forged from a simple stick and the ground. The method is ingenious in its simplicity. First, you need a straight stick, perhaps a foot or two long, and a few small distinct markers like pebbles or acorns. Plant the stick firmly in the ground. Now observe the shadow it casts. Take your first pebble and place it exactly at the tip of that shadow. This is your first mark. Now you wait. You must wait at least 15 to 20 minutes, long enough for the sun's position to change and for the shadow to visibly move. As the sun moves across the sky from east to west, its shadow will move in the opposite direction. After waiting, mark the new position of the shadow's tip with your second pebble. You now have 2 points on the ground. Draw a line between your first mark and your second mark. This line is your east-west line. The shadow moves from west to east. Therefore, your first mark, the one you made earlier, is west. Your second mark is east. Once you have this east-west line, everything else is simple. Stand with your left foot on the west mark and your right foot on the east mark. You are now facing true north. A line perpendicular to your east-west line gives you your north-south bearing. This method was not just for emergencies. It was a way to tell time, to understand the progression of the day, and to align oneself with the fundamental rhythm of the cosmos. There is another, even simpler sun method. If you are lost, find the shortest shadow. At solar noon, the moment the sun is at its absolute highest point in the sky, the shadow cast by your stick or by you will be the shortest it will be all day. In the northern hemisphere, that shortest shadow will point directly north. This wasn't just observation. For many tribes from the Haudenosaunee to the Hopi, the sun was a divine presence, a giver of life. Its movements dictated the time for planting, for ceremony, for hunting. The solstices and equinoxes, the extremes of the sun's journey, were marked with incredible precision in stone structures and sacred alignments. To read the sun's shadow was to read a daily message from the Creator. Method 2. The Night Sky's Map. The Star Council. When the sun deserts the sky, an even more detailed map reveals itself. The night sky was the first navigation screen, a celestial council of guides and storytellers. For millennia, indigenous peoples across North America studied its intricate movements, encoding its wisdom into their oral traditions. The most famous of these guides is the North Star. To the modern eye, the night sky is a chaotic scatter of lights, but to the ancestors it was a collection of familiar forms. The most famous is the constellation we call the Big Dipper, known to the Lakota as Wichakeuhapi the Stretcher, or to the Mi'kmaq as Muin the Bear. Finding the North Star, Polaris, using this constellation is a timeless technique. Find the two stars that form the outer edge of the Dipper's cup. We call them Merak and Dubhe. Imagine a line connecting them and extending upwards from the cup. Follow that line, and it will lead you to a single, moderately bright star. This is Polaris. Wichankpi Owangila, the star that sits still. It is the only star in the northern sky that does not move. All other stars, all other constellations wheel around it in a great cosmic dance. It sits directly above the Earth's North Pole. If you are facing Polaris, you are facing true north. But what if the Dipper is hidden? Other constellations offer clues. The W shape of Cassiopeia, known to the Navajo as Nahukos Bikai, the male revolving one, also points the way. The open side of the W, when extended, also aims toward the North Star. But the knowledge went far deeper. The Pawnee in particular were master astronomers. Their Earth lodges were built as micro-universes, with the roof openings and post alignments corresponding to the positions of sacred stars. Their entire ceremonial and agricultural calendar was dictated not just by the sun, but by the rising and setting of specific constellations. The sky was also a clock. As the entire celestial dome rotates around Polaris, one could tell the passage of time by the position of the Dipper. And for travelers there was a simpler trick: watch any star. If it appears to be rising, you are facing east. If it is setting, you are facing west. If it is arcing upwards to its peak, you are facing south. This knowledge was universal, reliable, and deeply sacred. The star people were family guides who would never ever let you be truly lost. Method 3. Reading the Wind. The Whispering Guide. The sun and stars are celestial guides. But what happens on a day of total cloud cover? What happens in the fog? The indigenous navigator simply moves to the next chapter in the book, The Wind. The wind is not random. In every region it has a prevailing direction. On the Great Plains, the wind blows predominantly from the west or southwest. In coastal regions, it has a daily rhythm, an onshore breeze during the day, an offshore breeze at night. This was baseline knowledge as common as knowing your own name. But the true skill lay in reading the effects of the wind. The wind is an invisible sculptor, and it leaves its signature carved into the entire landscape. This is called flagging. Look at the trees. On exposed hillsides or in open plains, the prevailing wind will stunt the growth of branches on the windward side. The branches will grow longer and fuller on the leeward downwind side, giving the tree the appearance of a flag permanently flying in one direction. By observing this flag, a traveler could instantly confirm the direction of the prevailing wind and thus their cardinal directions. In winter, the wind provides an even clearer sign. Snow does not fall evenly. It is carried by the wind. It is scoured clean from the windward side of a ridge and deposited in a deep sculpted drift or cornice on the leeward side. This sharp, overhanging edge is a massive white arrow. If you know the prevailing wind is from the northwest, you know that Cornice is pointing our southeast. This principle applies to sand dunes, to the erosion patterns on rocks, even to the way grass bends. For cultures like the Anishinaabe, the four winds, or four directions, were not just coordinates. They were powerful spiritual beings, Manidug. Gabibunikan was the north wind, the winter maker. Wabaninoden was the east wind, bringing the morning. To read the wind was to listen to these spirits, to understand the forces that shaped not only the land, but life itself. This was a sensory, full-body experience. The traveler would feel the cold, damp wind on their left cheek in the morning, and know without seeing the sun that the wind was from the north and they were walking east. It was an orientation of the self within the world. Method 4. The language of water river. Logic, all life needs water, and for the navigator, water is the ultimate guide. It is predictable, logical, and it never lies. The fundamental rule is simple: water only flows one way, downhill. This simple fact is the key to an entire system of navigation. Small streams or creeks flow into larger streams. Those streams flow into rivers. Those rivers flow into a great river, a lake, or the ocean. A person lost in the vast woodlands of the east or the mountains of the west had one primary directive: find water. Once a stream was found, the choice was simple: follow it downstream. Following water downstream was a guarantee. It would always lead to a larger body of water, and it would almost always lead to life. Larger rivers were the highways of the continent, the arteries of trade, and the sites of major settlements and fishing camps. To follow a river was to follow a path to other people. The land itself provided clues to water's direction. At a confluence where two rivers meet, the V shape of the land between them always points downstream. But the knowledge was also regional. A traveler would know the major watersheds. If you were in the Ohio Valley, you knew that every single drop of rain would eventually find its way to the Ohio River, and then to the Mississippi, and then to the Gulf of Mexico. This vast dendritic pattern was a mental map. By identifying a small creek, you could place yourself within this immense branching system. Even the shape of the river told a story. The water on the outside of a bend moves faster, eroding the bank and creating a deep channel known as a cut bank. The water on the inside of the bend moves slower, depositing sediment and creating a shallow, sandy point bar. This was critical knowledge. When crossing a river, you would avoid the deep, dangerous cut bank and aim for the shallow point bar. For tribes like the Chinook of the Pacific Northwest or the Mohawk of the Northeast, life was the river. Their languages, their mythologies, and their very identities were inseparable from the waters that sustained them. The river was not just a navigation route, it was the center of the world. Method 5. Botanical clues. The green compass. The plant kingdom. The Green Nation is a silent but incredibly talkative guide. Plants are rooted in place, and they must adapt to the conditions of that exact spot. Their survival depends on a constant, intimate relationship with the sun, the water, and the wind. And this adaptation, this body language, is a compass for those who know how to read it. The most famous piece of botanical lore is, of course, moss grows on the north side of trees. But is it true? The answer is mostly, and the reason is the key. In the northern hemisphere, the sun's daily path is in the southern sky. This means the south side of a tree gets more direct sunlight. It is warmer and drier. The north side is cast in shadow. It is cooler, damper, and retains more moisture. Moss lichens and certain fungi thrive in cool, damp, shady environments. Therefore, they will grow more thickly and luxuriantly on the north side of a tree trunk. The mistake is to trust a single tree. A tree leaning over a stream or in a deep shaded ravine might be mossy all over. The key, as with all natural navigation, is to find a pattern. A traveler would observe 10 or 20 trees in an open level area. They would look for the prevailing side of heavy moss growth. That consistent shadier side is north. This north-south difference is recorded in other ways. If you find a tree stump, look at the rings. The rings will often be wider on the south-facing side, as that side received more sun and energy for growth. The rings on the north side will be tighter and more compressed. This extends to the entire landscape. South-facing slopes get more sun. They are warmer and drier. They support different plants. In the west, this might be oaks, grasses, and chaparral. North-facing slopes are cooler and hold moisture and snow much longer. They support a different community, denser, darker forests of fir, spruce, and hemlock. This difference is so stark, it is like a giant NS compass painted on the mountains. For the ethnobotanist, every plant told a story. The presence of water-loving willows or cottonwoods told you a river was near, even if you couldn't see it. The presence of sun-loving prairie plants told you the soil was dry. The plant world was a map of the unseen forces of sun and water. Method 6. Animal Ways. The Trail Makers. The indigenous worldview did not place humans above nature. Humans were the younger brothers, and the animals were the older brothers, the first teachers. They were the true experts of the land, and to follow them was to follow a wisdom honed over eons. Animal movement is not random. It is driven by 3 powerful motivators: food, water, and safety. The most obvious animal sign is migration. The great herds of bison and caribou and the massive flocks of waterfowl followed ancient seasonal routes. Their V formation in the sky was a living compass pointing south in the fall and north in the spring. To see them was to be oriented in the grand cycle of the seasons. Animals are also master engineers, and their structures are aligned to the landscape. A beaver, for example, will almost always build its dam perpendicular to the flow of water to create a deep pond. The lodge, their home, will have its entrance underwater, with the living portion of the den on the leeward side, sheltered from the prevailing wind. Birds often build their nests on a specific side of a tree, usually the south or southeast, to catch the morning sun, and to be sheltered from the cold north and northwest winds. Spiders will build their webs in sheltered spots out of the main wind. Again, by averaging these observations, a clear pattern emerges. But perhaps the most useful sign for a traveler on foot was the animal trail. Deer, elk, and other game animals do not wander aimlessly. They create paths of least resistance. These trails follow the contours of the land, avoiding thick brush and steep climbs, and these trails almost always lead to 2 places downhill, to water or uphill to a safe bedding area with a good vantage point. A human traveler moving through dense, unfamiliar country would seek out these trails. They were a gift from the animal people, a pre-cut highway. If you needed water, you followed the trail downhill. If you needed a safe, dry place to camp with a good view, you followed it uphill. This was a relationship of profound respect. To the hunter, the animal was not just prey, it was a guide. Its presence, its tracks, its behavior, all were part of the living language of the land. Method 7. The Lay of the Land. Topographical memory. Long before satellites, indigenous navigators used a tool far more powerful, a fully developed 3-dimensional mental map. This was topographical memory, the ability to read the skeleton of the land. This is not about a single clue. It's about synthesis. It's about standing on a high point and seeing the pattern of the world. Look, the land is made of ridge lines and drainages, the high ground spines and the low ground valleys. Ridge lines were the high-speed routes. They offered clear lines of sight, drier ground, and less vegetation to fight through. Valleys were the water routes, the creek highways we've already discussed. The drainage pattern. The way all the small valleys feed into larger ones looks like a feather or a tree. This is called a dendritic pattern. A traveler would know this pattern intimately. They would know, I am on the third feather from the Red Rock Fork, and thus know their precise location. Landmarks were the anchors of this mental map. But these were not just any landmarks. They had to be unique. The mountain is not a useful name, but the mountain that looks like a sleeping bear, or the ridge where the snow lingers. Last is a precise coordinate. The most reliable topographical clue, as we saw with plants, is the north-south slope divide. Again, in the northern hemisphere, the sun is in the southern sky. This means south-facing slopes get direct, intense sunlight. They are warmer. The snow melts from them first in the spring. They are drier. The vegetation is sparser, or composed of different sun-loving species. The north-facing slope is its opposite. It gets only glancing sunlight, or none at all. It is cold, damp, and shaded. Snow will remain on this slope for weeks or months after the south side is bare. The vegetation is darker, thicker, often composed of conifers that thrive in the cool. This single powerful distinction, visible from miles away, is a giant compass painted on the land. A traveler waking up in an unfamiliar valley could simply look at the vegetation on the two opposing slopes and instantly know which way was north and which was south. For many cultures, the land itself was the sacred text. The Lakota called the Black Hills Paha Sapa the heart of everything that is. Mountains like Denali in Alaska or Bear Butte in South Dakota were not just piles of rock. They were sacred sites, a place of ceremony, the origin of stories. To know the topography was to know the sacred history of your people. Method 8. Earth's Scars. Geological signs. If you know where to look, the Earth itself bears the scars of its own creation, and these scars tell a story of direction. This is deep time navigation. During the last ice age, massive continental glaciers, miles thick, covered most of Canada and the northern United States. These glaciers were not static. They flowed, and as they moved, they acted like cosmic-scale sandpaper. These are glacial striations. As the ice sheets flowed generally from north to south, they dragged boulders and rocks trapped at their base. These rocks cut deep parallel grooves into the bedrock. For a traveler in a place like Minnesota, Maine, or across the vast Canadian Shield, finding a patch of exposed bedrock and identifying the grain of these striations would provide a near-perfect north-south line. This was a compass etched in stone, unchanging for 10,000 years. The glaciers left other clues. Chatter marks, crescent-shaped gauges in the rock, have their horns pointing in the direction of the ice flow. And erratics, massive boulders carried for hundreds of miles, and then dropped in a seemingly random place, told a story of the glacier's path. In lands untouched by ice, other geological clues emerge. This is differential weathering. The land is not eroded evenly. It is attacked by wind and rain. As we know, the prevailing wind has a direction. But so does the sun. The south and southwest faces of a rock formation, or a butte, receive the most intense solar radiation. This constant cycle of heating by day and cooling by night, combined with the scouring of wind, causes the rock to flake pit and weather faster than the shaded north side. By observing which face of a rock is most beaten up, a navigator could confirm their directions. This was reading a story written over millennia by the sun and wind. Method 9. The Hidden Trail. Subtle human markers. When European settlers first arrived on this continent, they wrote of a vast, untouched wilderness, a blank slate. This was perhaps the most profound and foundational error in their observations. This was not a blank slate. It was a manuscript, an ancient book where the writing was so perfectly integrated into the page it was invisible to an uneducated eye. This continent was not a wilderness. It was a garden, a landscape tended, managed, shaped, and inscribed by human hands for over 10,000 years. And like any lived-in home, the ancestors left signs. But these signs were not the loud, obvious markers of a foreign conqueror. They were not crude slashes of paint or iron signposts. They were subtle, they were organic, and they were brilliant. They were a secret language, an internal system of communication visible only to the initiated, and one of the most forgotten, yet most fascinating navigation aids. The most intimate of these signs is this: a marker tree. This is not an accident of nature. This is not storm damage. This is a living, breathing piece of cartography. As a young, flexible sapling, this tree, perhaps an oak, a maple, or an elm, was carefully bent to the ground by a human hand. It was secured perhaps with a rawhide thong or a heavy anchoring stone. Its natural drive to grow upwards was subverted, forced to grow horizontally parallel to the earth. The main tip, the apical meristem, would eventually win its battle with gravity, turning back towards the sun and sky. The result, decades or even centuries later, is this: a permanent, unnatural right-angle bend. This was a signpost that would not rot. It would not be buried by snow. It would not fall over. It would in fact grow stronger, larger, and more obvious with each passing season, but only to one who knew this silent language. This L shape was a vector. The horizontal trunk was an arrow. It pointed the way. It might indicate a safe, shallow crossing on a dangerous river. It might point toward a hidden spring, a protected campsite, a trail junction, or even a sacred site. A trail through dense country might be marked by a series of these living, growing sentinels, each one pointing to the next. From the intimate we move to the monumental. Where the markers were not living, they were built for eternity from the very bones of the earth. This is the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, a vast silent circle of stones laid out on a 10,000-foot mountaintop. This was not a random pile of rocks. It is a complex, sacred, and stunningly accurate astronomical computer. The central cairn and its 28 spokes align perfectly with the rising and setting of the sun on the summer solstice. They align with the heliacal rising of sacred stars like Sirius and Aldebaran. This was not just a sign telling you, "You are here." This was a sign that told you, "You are here in this exact moment in this vast, ordered cosmos." It bound the traveler on the earth to the movements of the sky, a macro compass that oriented not just the body, but the spirit. And finally, there were the trails themselves, the great traces and paths, like the great warrior path that cut through the Appalachians or the Natchez Trace. These were not faint deer paths. These were the interstates of the indigenous world. In many places, they were worn so deeply into the earth by the constant passage of millions of human feet over millennia that they became permanent topographical features. A holloway, or a sunken trace, a depression sometimes 2 or 3 feet deep, following the most logical, high ground, dry routes. A traveler moving through unfamiliar country would learn to feel for this. They would feel a subtle, unnatural depression, a pathway clear of major roots and boulders. To find one of these ancient trails was to find a highway, a guarantee of the most efficient route, engineered not by machines, but by time. You were not just following a path, you were walking with the ancestors. Method 10. The mind's map, song, story, and memory. We have looked at a dozen clues in the physical world, but the single most important navigation tool was not physical at all. It was carried in the human mind. This is the system of oral maps, the songs, stories, and sacred ceremonies that encode geography into memory. This concept, known as songlines in Aboriginal Australia, was equally powerful in North America. A creation story was not just a myth, it was a map. A story might say, and the hero ancestor walked south away from the great mountain. He came to the shallow part of the river where the red willows grow. He crossed and climbed the bluff that looks like a turtle, and there he found the cave. This is not just a story. It is a set-in-stone, step-by-step set of directions. To know the story was to know the map. The song was a mnemonic device that made the map unforgettable, ensuring it could be passed error-free from one generation to the next. This system was embedded in the language itself. European place names are often commemorative. They name places after people, Washington or other older places, New York. Indigenous place names are almost universally descriptive. A river is not the James River. It is the river that flows fast from the north. A mountain is the peak where the eagles nest. A clearing is the place we find the sweet berries. These names are practical. They are instructions. The name tells you what the place is, what you can find there, and where it is in relation to other things. The entire map was embedded in the language. This is why the loss of indigenous languages is so tragic. When a language dies, an entire library of this geographical, ecological, and spiritual knowledge, a library thousands of years in the making, is burned to the ground. This mind map was the ultimate tool, the one that wove all the other 9 into a single, coherent, unbreakable worldview. The sun, the stars, the wind, the water, the plants, the animals, the lay of the land, the scars of the earth, the markers of the ancestors, and the map of the mind. These are not 10 separate tricks. They are 10 chapters from the same book, a book of deep ecological literacy, written in a language we are only just beginning to remember. This knowledge is not truly forgotten. It survives. It survives in the stories of elders, in the traditions of indigenous communities, and it survives waiting in the land itself. It teaches us that lost is a state of disconnection, and found is not about a pin on a digital map. It is about understanding in your bones that you are part of a living, communicating world. A world that is always, always speaking to you, if you only know how to listen. This ancestral wisdom is a vital part of our human heritage. It teaches us not just how to survive, but how to belong. If you were inspired by this journey into the deep knowledge of the land, please like this video and share it so this wisdom can travel further. Subscribe to our channel for more explorations of our world's hidden histories and ancestral science. And in the comments below, let us know what other forms of natural wisdom do you want to explore. Thank you for listening.